Welcome back to the One Chart at a Time video series. I'm your host, John Schwabish. Now, we are already deep within this category of plotting geospatial data, making maps. And you've seen lots of different types of maps already and different types of ways that we can adjust a map or we can add other objects to a map. And so today's episode, we're actually talking about adding arrows or lines or other objects that get a sense of flow, and hence the name flow maps. And to help us understand how to reuse and read a flow map, we have the one and only RJ Andrews from Info We Trust. RJ, over to you.
My name's RJ Andrews. I make maps and charts and diagrams. And one of the types of maps I make are flow maps, or what's known in the literature as origin destination maps. Okay, so this is a public resource. It's a Google Slides. You can go on Twitter and find the link if the link isn't right here. But the origin destination, like what's the history of flow maps? And so you have some idea of flow maps early on, where they're connecting points geographically. And then we get into the 1830s and the railroad is coming. And so engineers have to figure out where to build the railroad lines. And so they start looking at traffic along the roads. And Henry Harness does the first real modern flow map where he's showing all the flow into Dublin. And my theory is that there's a French civil engineer who actually saw this and built a whole second career out of it. That civil engineer is Charles Joseph Minard, and he sends the flow map to new heights. And so we love Minard's work. And then from Minard, you have decades of incredible innovation in French flow maps. So what is a flow map? So we have this concept of origin destination, connecting one point to another, and then showing data along that flow. And the normal way we show data along that flow is by making the line wider or thinner according to some quantitative value. And you can see here in some of these examples, we have some really creative ways of showing data along the flow, whether it's categorizing it with different color schemes or texture schemes, showing flow to and against. All right, so there's a lot of innovation at the end of the 1800s in France with flow maps, and then there's it's sort of like peters out and not a lot happens. All right, so that's the history of the flow map. And then what follows is quite a lot of, and here's a paper on kind of like best practices on how to programmatically kind of connect origin destination maps. All right, but the rest of this deck, which I'm just going to give kind of like an emotional tour through, shows like just a lot of examples of how people are connecting things. And so you can see things that are very programmatic. You can see things that are very experimental. Sometimes arrowheads are involved to show kind of the direction of flow. Often arrowheads, are really just not well implemented because the arrowhead just kind of like dominates. And as we look through all these like later 20th century, early 21st century flow maps, you can really start to appreciate the craft that's necessary. Here's a manuscript from the war, showing the troop movements. But you can really appreciate the craft necessary to make a flow map work. It's something that's very, very difficult to pull off without doing a lot of custom work. So there's a lot of different flow maps out there, and they're related. Here's a beautiful 3D one. I mean, wow, that really catches your attention. And somebody who's made flow maps, there's other similar chart forms. So we can think of alluvial diagrams. We can think of kind of like decision tree kind of flows, where you might put the probability in the width of the line of the decision tree. We can think of Sankey diagrams, which are engineering diagrams that usually have some cyclical nature to them. So these are all related to flow maps, but they're not really flow maps. Why? Because they are not geographic maps. Everything we're looking at right now shows flow over some sort of geography. Here's a really beautiful one from the Washington Post. I mean, wow, isn't that great? Okay, so there's a lot more of these to look at, but I think that this is supposed to be a very short overview of flow maps. And so once we find a really good one, oh, that's nice. So here's the Audubon Society's flow of bird migration. I think this is a beautiful one to end on. So again, RJ Andrews, and you can see lots more by finding this origin destination slide deck on Twitter at InfoWeTrust.
And thanks to RJ for that whirlwind tour through the history of flow maps. I hope you are able to see through RJ's video how different they are, how many options there are, and all the different ways that you can add data to a map in this particular approach. So until tomorrow, this has been the One Chart at a Time video series. I'll see you then.